Hello everyone, this is Damon with PixNub Software, and this is just a video to discuss some manual recovery techniques for when you have images with heavy green spill and you need to fix those in post-processing. Now if you find yourself having to do these techniques, then I highly recommend reconfiguring your green screen setup because typically these are not needed. So just keep that in mind. And another thing to point out too is you may not realize how much spill you actually have in the image, especially if you're looking at the image on the back of the camera and you see a small little thumbnail. You know, just looking at this, you think, okay, it looks okay. And even in Photoshop, it's really not that noticeable when we have this green screen here. But watch what happens when I enable a layer mask that I created just to remove the green screen. And there's no spill correction being applied. I'm just applying a direct transparency mask. But notice how green the hair now looks. And so that's important to know that it's a little bit deceiving when you're just looking at the image as a whole because you don't realize how green that hair actually is. So the issue with this setup with the green screen is, number one, the person was very, very close to the screen. I mean, they were pretty much right on the screen. And then second, the green screen was very large. So that's two variables that combined make for a bad spill situation. You always want to keep the screen as small as possible because you're going to get the least amount of light reflecting back, and then more spacing from the screen will also reduce the amount of green being reflected back. So for example, the top of that hair that you see all this green here, that's because we have the strobes bouncing light from the top of this screen directly onto the top of the head because they're so close and the screen is so tall and wide. You see we've got spill on the side of the face too. In any case, I'm just going to demonstrate extracting this. And I will point out too that this is not a step-by-step 1, 2, 3 procedure. It's going to vary based on each image, so it's better to have an understanding of different techniques and how to apply them instead of just trying to do a exact step-by-step procedure for each image. So to start, there's a few ways to do this, but what I'm going to do is pretty much do an all manual technique after Easy Green Screen runs with the default settings. Now, Easy Green Screen 6.5, there are two menus. The first, we've got the regular filter menu. In the second menu, we've got this HTML panel. And this is meant for post-extraction editing. So I'm going to be using this one, and I'm not even going to mess with the settings in the Easy Green Screen filter. So these top 4 buttons, these launch the Easy Green Screen filter. Now the top 2 will bring that user interface up. The bottom 2 will skip the user interface. I'm just going to run single mask and skip the user interface. So this is just going to run Easy Green Screen default settings, no adjustments, won't bring up the user interface, and it's just going to give us a base extraction to start. And as expected, the top of that head was extracted. However, we have a non-destructive layer stack with the way Easy Green Screen does the extractions. And what I mean by non-destructive is nothing is directly applied to the image. So the transparency is in a mask, the spill correction is in separate layers above. So you have full correction ability in Photoshop to correct for some of these things. So the first thing I like to do is just take a look at the mask. So in this view mode here, you can I'll first demonstrate manually. If you hit Alt key on Windows or Option on Mac and click on the mask, you can view inside the mask. But if you can't remember the keyboard shortcut, just in the view mode, hit mask, and it's going to do the same thing. It's going to bring you right into the mask. And so right now I'm just going to do any quick touch-ups that are easy to do just by painting. And so a white paintbrush. That belt buckle had some green reflection from the screen. This screen, those very, very dark wrinkles didn't get all the way erased, so I'm painting black. You'd probably never notice those in the extraction because it's low percentage opacity with that. But in any case, I'm just correcting the areas. I'll show you a technique here too. You see this arm that had that heavy green spill on the inside of the arm? It's partially extracted. Now, if you see that you do have a pretty good line on that to follow, what you can do is use the dodge tool, dodge it to the highlights, exposure, I'm just going to use around 50%. And with the dodge tool targeted to highlights, it's not going to affect the black areas. So you can go right over the edge. And it's not perfect. You could clean that up more if you had to, but for the sake of this video, I'm just going to move on and be a little quicker here. And so you can use a combination of the paintbrush and the dodge just to fix any easy areas of the mask to fix. Now for this, I'm going to use a different technique. So once you get to the point where it's going to be hard to paint with the exact edges, what I like to do is first run a select subject. Now the select subject is the new tool in CC 2018 that uses artificial intelligence to make a rough selection of your image. Now running it here is going to do the same thing as if you run it in your Photoshop menu. Where'd it go? Here, right here. The difference is if you're on a different layer, if you select it here, it's automatically going to select the correct layer to run it. So once you have that, let's go back into the mask view again. I'm just going to paint white. And since we have that selection made, if you notice, I can paint right over the edge of the line, and I don't have to paint and try to stay within the lines because that selection is protecting where I'm painting. Okay, so now you see that we have a rough cutout of the hair. It's not perfect, but we're going to touch that up. And so the next thing is the select and mask. This is just going to run the standard Photoshop select and mask. And it's also the difference between just right clicking and hitting select and mask and running it from here is if you run it from the Easy Green Screen user interface, it's first going to select the right layer, but it's also going to set the view mode for you, and it's going to grab the correct brush for doing the edge refinement, and it's going to reset all these to 0. So if you were using select and mask before and you had remember settings checked, it could give you some settings that you're not going to want to use. So just use this from the Easy Green Screen user interface for this purpose, and it's going to set this select and mask interface just as you want it for working with this. So anyway, I just brush right over the edges, and you could try to use some of these other sliders to fix things up, but I actually don't like doing it that way. I just brush over the edge. When I'm done, hit OK, and you see there's still some slight transparency in the hair from that select and mask. I'm going to make a selection around that. Now too, I'll point out this is probably, or quite possibly, you'll never see that slight transparency against the background, but nevertheless I'm going to fix that. So I like to make a selection around just the area I want to fix. And then if you run a levels, there's 2 levels in here. If you just click on levels, it's going to bring you in the mask view. You see if we bring that the white point down, we can fix that transparency. The other way to do this, if you select levels FG, that's going to view the foreground, but you're actually targeting the mask, so it's the same exact thing. Let's before I do that, let's uncheck. Alright, so we're still targeting the mask, but notice this transparency as I move this slider. We're fixing that slight transparent issue. I think somewhere in there is pretty good, so I'm just going to select OK. Deselect. So now with this image, there's a couple more things to touch up. We've got spill correction needs touched up a little bit, and then also this yellow got muted a little bit by the automatic spill correction from Easy Green Screen, but I'll show you how to fix both of those. So to explain the spill correction, this is all in a separate layer stack. The first layer stack you have is one that's attempting to correct for the color. The second one just desaturates green. So if there's anything remaining, it tries to just desaturate that. So I'll show you if I undo the first spill correction. You see that where that was heavy green on top, that just becomes a grayscale, which is really not what you want. You want to fix the color, not make it gray. This is kind of just a catch-all to catch any little last bit remaining. If that makes sense, I hope so. But anyway, first thing I'm going to do is go into this spill correction layer and just see what happens if I adjust the opacity up. And just try to get that to so it looks about as good as we can make it look with just adjusting that opacity. And then beyond that, we've got two paint layers. And for this image, I'm just going to focus on the color blend paint layer. What this does is it blends a layer in color blend mode, which means that you're not going to lose detail, but you'll be correcting for color. And so this is clipped. This little L-shaped arrow means it's clipped to the transparency of the foreground layer, so it's only affecting that layer when we paint. So we'll just grab a paintbrush tool, and how I like to work it is first in the eyedropper, I don't ever want to use point sample, because if there's any digital noise in your image, you might sample one point that's not perfect. Somewhere around a 3x3 or a 5x5 average is a good sample point. In any case, so once I have the brush, if you hit the Alt key on Windows or the Option on Mac, it brings up your color picker. And if you select that, I select the color of a hair that I want to make this color be around the edge. You see it sets the foreground swatch, which is the paint color. Now if you see this setting the background swatch, and I'll demonstrate this here, in your color panel, if you have that background selected, that background swatch icon, now if you're on the brush tool and you use the Alt key, it selects the background, or it sets that to the background color. I don't know why Photoshop does that, because if you're on the brush tool, you wouldn't think you'd want to set the background color because it paints with the foreground. But in any case, if you see that happen, just make sure you have that foreground swatch selected in your color panel. Okay, so I'm setting the brush color and I'm just brushing over the edge. And if you don't like the color, you can always go into your history and undo that, or use your keyboard shortcuts, Control Z to undo it. Oh, you know what I did? Okay, so if you see something weird happen, like I just did, when I undid my history, I went back to where I was on the spill correction layer, so now it's not doing what it's supposed to be doing. Okay, so I want to get back into that manual paint layer. I'll try to make this go quicker. I've been talking a little bit much here. For this too, I forgot to do this and I forgot to mention, it's better to have a soft brush so you're blending the effect of this. So somewhere in there actually looks pretty good. And by the way, this opacity of this layer is set to 50% by default. You can set it as high or as low as you want. If you set it to 100, it usually looks a little bit flat, so I like to set it to around 50 to start and just adjust if needed. You can also use this same technique around the skin areas. I'm just sampling the skin color and painting right in that. And if you get some that where you see like there, I painted on the jersey. I didn't mean I did it twice. Anyway, you can just grab actually not a black, excuse me, grab the eraser tool for that, and then you just, I didn't want that. I grabbed the wrong tool. Alright, my eraser tool here. So, okay, I'm messing all kinds of things up now. I guess it's hard for me to record a video and think at the same time. Anyway, I'm just painting that off in the in that layer. So, see, with and without this layer, this is basically just to do manual color correction. And you do have a paint blend mode that's set to normal above, and that's normal blend. You don't use this too often. I'm just going to flip this blending mode to normal just so you can see the difference here. In normal, it makes everything real flat. If you turn the opacity up, you see that that's just a regular solid color that we painted. But if we have this set to color blend mode, I'll turn the opacity down. You see it just blends the color in without losing the image detail. So that actually looks pretty good. That's really about a 20 or 30 second thing that I probably wasted about 3 or 4 minutes talking about. Okay, so next, if you just view, let's turn the spill correction off here, and you can see that yellow, because of the default spill correction settings in Easy Green Screen, that bright yellow got muted a little bit. Now there are settings in Easy Green Screen to adjust for that, which I didn't do because we didn't even pull up the Easy Green Screen user interface. But not to worry, it's easy to fix here. If I can grab a black brush and make sure you're on the mask for the spill correction. And for this, I'm going to use a hard brush, hardness all the way up at 100%, because I don't want to fade this effect. Okay, what? Oh, I see what's... Oh no, I don't see what's going on. I'm painting white in there. Okay, so that's not what I want to do. And something is awry, and I'm not... oh, I'm on the eraser tool. Okay, so I knew there was a catch. Okay, so if you're painting in there and something's wrong, slow down and backtrack and see. You need to be on the brush tool. I was on the eraser tool, which I didn't want to be on. So in the spill correction layer, backing up, I'm going to paint black in that layer. Okay, that's looking more like what we want. Just be careful you don't paint any areas that you need spill correction, because basically all you're doing is this spill correction layer determines where spill correction is being applied based on the colors in your image. So anywhere that it's black, no spill correction is being applied. And you see I did use a soft brush there, like I said I wasn't going to do. In any case, nonetheless, I don't think it's going to be noticeable either way. You see that we are painting off the spill correction. Okay, so this is probably about a 15-minute video if I'm guessing, which covers something that usually takes about 1 to 2 minutes tops. So just learn some of these techniques and try them out, and you'll get fast. And you know, will actually be pretty easy when you do them. After probably 5 or 6, you'll get the hang of it. But again, if you're having to do this, make your screen smaller and space them out more, and you should never have to do this anyway. Again, thanks for watching, and if you're interested at all in Easy Green Screen, please be sure to visit our website. That is pixnub.com.